You want to hear the wildest part of all this? I didn't move into some chaotic war zone or troubled neighborhood. I moved into a small, aging house with a slightly crooked roof, an overgrown garden that refused to behave, and just enough legal distance from the HOA to send one particular woman completely over the edge. That's all it took. One invisible property line. One narrow strip of land outside her authority. And suddenly, a woman who probably introduced herself as a neighborhood angel in pearls transformed into a full-time dictator, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. The moment I first saw the place, I fell for it. Instantly. It sat right at the edge of one of those overly polished neighborhoods where every house looked identical, like they'd all been stamped out of the same plastic mold, same shutters, same trim lawns, same lifeless symmetry staring back at you. But mine stood apart. Mine had character. It had scars from time. The roof sagged slightly, like it had stories to tell. The garden wasn't neat, but it was alive, growing wild and stubborn in its own way. And the best part? Hidden in the paperwork. The house sat outside the HOA boundary. That detail felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater. No pointless monthly fees for amenities I'd never touch. No committee deciding what shade my flowers should be. No board members with too much authority judging whether my mailbox met their precious community standards. I remember standing in that cracked driveway while the moving truck unloaded box after box, thinking something I hadn't felt in a long time. I could actually breathe here. Turns out, freedom has a way of offending people who worship control. From the very first afternoon, I could feel it, eyes on me, across the street, inside one of those spotless HOA houses. A curtain kept twitching. Not once, not casually, constantly. Every box I carried, every piece of furniture I moved, every time I bent down to place something on the porch, it was like I was unloading contraband instead of kitchen supplies. Someone was watching me with unsettling focus. That someone was Karen. I didn't know her name at the time, but I recognized the type instantly. Tight smile, sharp, calculating eyes, posture stiff with self-importance, like she'd been personally appointed to guard civilization itself. Later, I learned she wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was the enforcer, the HOA's loudest supporter, the kind of person who treated bylaws like sacred scripture and used fear as a management strategy. And my house, completely legal, completely independent, completely none of her business, was driving her insane. At first, her tactics were small, petty. HOA newsletters somehow started appearing in my mailbox, even though I wasn't part of their system. A bright yellow violation notice got taped to my front door, listing rules that didn't even apply to my property. Then came a flyer for the next HOA meeting, slipped under my doormat like a polite threat pretending to be an invitation. The first time I laughed. I actually laughed, crumpled it up, tossed it in the trash, and went back to unpacking. But by the end of that week, it stopped being funny. My motion light kept flickering on in the middle of the night. Trash bins got knocked over. A piece of mail went missing. Then one morning, I found a handwritten note tucked under my windshield wiper. All caps, "You don't belong here." That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just irritated. She was mobilizing. This house had existed long before the HOA was even created. It was legally grandfathered outside their control. The boundary lines were crystal clear on every map, every deed, every official county record. But Karen didn't care about boundaries. She cared about obedience. And in her mind, a home she couldn't control was a crack in her perfect illusion. So I did the one thing people like Karen hate the most. I stayed calm. I focused on my yard, mowed the grass, trimmed the hedges, cleared the weeds, but kept the wildflowers that gave the place personality. Slowly, the house started to wake up. It wasn't perfect. It was messy for a while, but it was alive. And apparently, nothing made Karen angrier than watching something she couldn't control become beautiful on its own terms. One morning, I woke up to a loud, metallic pounding outside. Repetitive, aggressive. I stepped out and froze. Bright red flyers had been stapled all across my fence, one after another, like someone had decorated for Christmas using intimidation. Notice of violation. Lawn noncompliance. Visual disorder. Unauthorized exterior conditions. I tore them down while curtains twitched up and down the street. Karen didn't have a nerve to stand there openly, but I could feel her watching from behind glass, enjoying every second of it. That was her first real move, public humiliation. If she couldn't control me legally, she'd turn the neighborhood against me. And for a while, it worked. Neighbors stopped lingering. Waves became shorter. A woman walking her dog crossed the street instead of passing my yard. Kids who used to ride their bikes nearby suddenly stayed away like my property was contagious. Then came the letters. Official-looking envelopes. HOA letterhead. Legal-sounding threats. Fines, liens, consequences that would have been terrifying if they weren't completely fake. I kept every single one. Every envelope. Every notice. Every ridiculous warning. Bought a folder and started building a paper trail. If Karen wanted drama, fine. I'd deal in evidence. Then the board showed up. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was trimming hedges, a black SUV rolled up. 2 HOA board members stepped out, clipboards in hand, acting like federal agents. They introduced themselves with that polished, smug tone people use when they assume you're already intimidated. Said they were there to inspect my property. I just stared at them for a second. The audacity was almost impressive. I calmly explained that my property wasn't under their jurisdiction. They started talking about community cohesion and shared standards, which is basically HOA code for do what we say or we'll make your life miserable. They walked around anyway, scribbling notes like vultures trying to look professional. That night, I added their visit to the folder. Then things got worse. Trash bags started appearing ripped open near my fence. Someone spray painted along the edge of my driveway. A garden light got smashed. Car horns blared at odd hours. Power tools roared to life at dawn like clockwork. It started as petty harassment, then became consistent, then personal. And strangely, the worse it got, the calmer I became, because desperation leaves evidence. Karen thought she was pressuring me. What she was really doing was documenting her own obsession. The turning point came from the last person I expected, a quiet man across the street, the kind who used to give a nervous half-wave and then glance toward Karen's house like he'd broken some rule. One evening, while I was fixing my front steps, he walked over and spoke in a low voice. "You're not the problem," he said. "A lot of us are just scared of her." That changed everything. He told me Karen had been terrorizing people for years. Fines over flower pots. Warnings over chalk drawings. Late-night photos taken from sidewalks. Constant pressure until people apologized just to be left alone. I wasn't her first target. I was just the first one she couldn't legally control, and she couldn't stand it. After that, the silence started breaking. A woman walking her dog lingered long enough to admit she'd received 3 violation notices over a bird feeder. Another neighbor quietly handed me copies of letters Karen had left on his door. People who had spent years keeping their heads down started whispering the same thing. They were tired. Karen noticed a shift, and she lost what little composure she had left. One Saturday morning, she marched down the street with several board members, like she was leading some ridiculous parade of authority. They stopped at the edge of my yard, waving papers, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. Unauthorized modifications, community disruption, escalating penalties. It was pure performance. And that's when I stopped playing defense. I stepped forward, calm, holding the folder, which had now become a thick binder, and started pulling things out. Fake notices, threat letters, photos of vandalism, dates, times, copies, signatures. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The street went quiet. That kind of silence that happens when a lie finally collides with proof. You could actually see it happen. People stopped looking at me. They started looking at Karen. Really looking. And for the first time, she blinked